Bruce Lee was at gym when 300-pound bodybuilder said, "You're nothing but bones." 5 seconds later, the gym door opens. Bruce Lee walks in with a simple canvas bag on his shoulder. No noise, no show, just another guy stepping onto concrete. A huge bodybuilder looks up from the bench press and laughs. Loud, confident. "You're way too small to fight anyone," he says. This isn't some random guy talking trash. His name is Marcus Webb. Around Los Angeles gyms, that name means something. Marcus is Muhammad Ali's main sparring partner, the man Ali trusts to hit him hard, to push him, to test him. They grew up together in Louisville before their paths split. Ali chose speed and timing. Marcus chose size and force. He built his body into a weapon. And standing in front of him now is a man he thinks he already understands. Small frame, quiet presence, no muscle to fear. He's wrong. Los Angeles. Midsummer, 1967. The place was called Iron Temple, wedged between an auto body shop and a family-run taco stand in a neighborhood where the rent was low and the dreams were desperate. Inside, the air didn't move so much as hang there, heavy with chalk and sweat, and that sharp metallic scent that gets into everything when men spend hours gripping iron. The walls were exposed brick, painted over decades ago and now showing their age in chips and cracks that looked like a map of some forgotten country. Overhead, fluorescent tubes buzzed and flickered, casting everything in that unforgiving white light that made every vein stand out, every muscle fiber visible. This wasn't a place for casual fitness. No smoothie counter, no branded merchandise, no membership cards with corporate logos, just weights and benches and mirrors, and the kind of men who came there because they needed to build something, needed to prove something, needed to transform themselves into versions that could survive whatever waited for them outside those doors. The soundtrack was constant, iron meeting iron, breath forced through clenched teeth, the occasional grunt or shout, and underneath it all, a radio playing soul music that nobody really heard anymore. Bruce entered just past noon, and outside, the temperature was climbing toward 100 degrees. Inside was worse. He wore loose black cotton pants and a plain gray t-shirt, both already beginning to darken with moisture. The canvas bag over his shoulder looked light, almost empty. He moved like water, finding a path smooth and unhurried. Each step placed with that unconscious precision that separates people who've trained their bodies from people who've mastered them. He'd been invited by Danny Chun, a Chinese-American welterweight who'd seen Bruce demonstrate at a tournament in Long Beach and had been talking about it ever since. Danny trained at Iron Temple, thought the powerlifters and bodybuilders there could learn something from how Bruce generated force from stillness, how he moved without telegraphing intention. Bruce had accepted the invitation out of genuine curiosity. He wanted to understand Western training methods, wanted to see how these athletes built their kind of strength, wanted to know if there was anything he could integrate into his own constantly evolving system. The moment he walked in, conversations died. Barbells paused mid-rep. Heads turned with that automatic awareness gyms develop, that tribal sensor that detects anything unfamiliar in the territory. This compact Asian man, maybe 135 pounds soaking wet, stepping into a cathedral of mass like he had every right to be there. Most of the athletes went back to their training after a glance. New faces showed up sometimes. Didn't mean much, but a few kept watching. And at the far end of the floor, beneath mirrors that reflected bodies built like brutal sculpture, Marcus Webb was finishing his final set of deadlifts. Marcus embodied everything bodybuilding meant in 1967. 6 feet 1 inch, 250 pounds of muscle stacked on muscle. His body shaped like someone had taken human anatomy and decided to make it louder. Arms that looked like they could bend rebar. A chest that seemed to occupy its own zip code. Shoulders so broad they created shadows. Legs that made walking look like a controlled fall between pillars. Every inch of visible skin was slick with effort, and every muscle group was so defined you could teach an anatomy class just by pointing. He lowered the barbell with a controlled crash that made the concrete floor complain, straightened up with a sound like a building settling, and grabbed the towel hanging on the power rack. That's when he noticed Bruce. Actually noticed him, and his expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Confusion, amusement, something close to disbelief. He draped the towel around his neck and walked over. Each step had that distinctive bodybuilder gait, that rolling movement that comes from thighs too massive to allow anything resembling normal locomotion. Other lifters noticed Marcus moving and paused their sets. When Marcus Webb crossed the floor with purpose, something was about to happen. He stopped about 6 feet from Bruce, and the size difference was almost absurd. Marcus's forearm was legitimately thicker than Bruce's entire leg. His shadow fell across the smaller man like nightfall. "Help you find something, brother?" Marcus asked, and his voice had that particular quality of false friendliness that barely conceals amusement. His training partners had gathered behind him now, 3 other massive men forming a wall of muscle and curiosity. Bruce looked up at him with eyes that revealed absolutely nothing. No fear, no aggression, no submission, just assessment. People who knew Bruce would recognize that look. It was the expression a leopard gives an elephant, aware of the size difference, completely unconcerned about it. "Danny Chun invited me," Bruce said quietly. His voice carried traces of Hong Kong beneath the English, each word chosen with the care of someone speaking a language that wasn't his first, but that he decided to master anyway. "Danny." Marcus glanced around, spotted Danny near the heavy bags, and his smile widened. "Danny invited you to train here? You?" He said it like the concept was inherently hilarious. One of his friends snickered. Another shook his head slowly, grinning. This was entertainment now, a break from the monotony of sets and reps. "To observe," Bruce clarified. "To learn your methods." "Our methods." Marcus repeated the words like they tasted funny. He looked back at his training partners, then down at Bruce again. "Brother, our methods involve moving weight that would put you in the hospital. No offense, but you're what? $130? $140 soaking wet with rocks in your pockets." "138, Bruce said evenly. Marcus laughed. And it wasn't cruel exactly, but it carried that edge of superiority that comes from never having been physically challenged, never having met someone who made you question your assumptions. "See, that's my point exactly. I'm carrying over 100 pounds more than you in pure muscle. You understand what that means in a real situation, in an actual fight." Bruce's expression didn't change. "I understand what you think it means." Something flickered across Marcus's face. The smile didn't fade, but it hardened. "What I think it means? Man, I spar with Muhammad Ali. You know who that is? The heavyweight champion of the actual world. I've been in the ring with the most dangerous man alive, and I can hold my own because I've got the size, the strength, the mass to back it up. That's not thinking. That's knowing." "Ali is fast," Bruce observed. "Fast don't mean nothing when you can't generate power." Marcus shot back. "Speed is cute. Power is what wins fights. Mass is what creates power. This ain't theory, little man. This is physics. This is reality." He held up one massive arm, flexed it, and the bicep swelled to the size of Bruce's head. "You see this? This is what 2,000 calories a day and 6 hours of training builds. This is strength. Real, measurable, undeniable strength." Bruce looked at the arm, then back at Marcus's face. "You believe size and strength are the same thing?" "I believe," Marcus said, taking a half step closer and using his bulk like a wall, "that when someone my size connects with someone your size, all the kung fu in China doesn't change what happens next. That's not belief. That's just how the world works. The gym had gone completely silent now. Even the radio seemed quieter. Every person in the building was watching this interaction, sensing something building, wondering where it would go. Bruce stood perfectly still. And that stillness had its own quality, like the moment before lightning strikes. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but carried through the silence like it had been amplified. Would you like to discover if you're correct? The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Marcus blinked. What? Your theory about size and power. Would you like to test it? For a moment, Marcus just stared at him, processing what he'd just heard. Then he laughed again. But this time it sounded different. Less certain. You're challenging me? You're actually challenging me right now. I'm offering you an opportunity to prove your point, Bruce said calmly. One of Marcus's friends spoke up. Marcus, man, don't waste your time. Kid's delusional. But something had shifted in Marcus's eyes. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the audience watching. Maybe it was just that ancient human need to establish dominance when challenged. He looked down at Bruce for a long moment, and in that moment you could see him calculating, weighing, deciding. All right, he said finally. All right, little man. But when this goes sideways, remember you asked for it. Bruce nodded once. A small movement that somehow carried more weight than Marcus's entire speech. He set his canvas bag down near the wall, rolled his shoulders in a motion so subtle you'd miss it if you blinked, and stepped into the open space near the heavy bags where there was room to move. Marcus followed, and the crowd followed Marcus. Within seconds, a rough circle had formed. Bodybuilders, powerlifters, a few boxers who'd been working the speed bag. Even the old man who ran the front desk came shuffling over to see what was happening. The energy in the room had changed completely. This wasn't training anymore. This was something else. Something primal that gyms sometimes became when egos collided and men needed to establish hierarchy through action instead of words. Danny Chun pushed through the crowd, his face tight with concern. Bruce, man, you don't have to do this. Marcus is just talking. He doesn't mean anything by it. Bruce glanced at him briefly. It's fine, Danny. This is educational. For everyone. Educational. Danny looked at Marcus, then back at Bruce. He outweighs you by over 100 pounds. He trains with Ali. This isn't some point sparring tournament. I know, Bruce said quietly, and something in his tone made Danny step back. Made him understand that whatever was about to happen, Bruce had already played it out in his mind 1,000 times. Marcus was loosening up now, rolling his massive shoulders, shaking out his arms. He had that fighter's habit of movement before action, that need to prepare the body for violence, even when the violence was supposed to be controlled. He wasn't taking this as seriously as he probably should have been. But he wasn't completely careless either. You didn't become Ali's sparring partner by being stupid. We doing this for real? Or we playing tag? Marcus asked. What would you prefer? Bruce responded. I prefer, Marcus said, squaring up, to show you what happens when theory meets reality. Don't worry, I'll pull my punches. Don't want to actually hurt you. Bruce said nothing. He simply stood there, feet shoulder-width apart, hands relaxed at his sides, weight distributed so perfectly. He looked like he could move in any direction without preparation. He wasn't bouncing, wasn't shifting, wasn't displaying any of the nervous energy fighters usually show before contact. He just stood there, watching Marcus with those dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. Someone in the crowd called out. $20 says the big man drops him in 5 seconds. 5? I got 20 says 3 seconds. Another voice answered. Laughter rippled through the circle. This was entertainment to them. David and Goliath. Except everyone knew how this version ended. Because physics didn't care about mythology. Mass times velocity equals force. And Marcus had mass to spare. Marcus settled into what looked like a boxing stance. Hands up, elbows in, chin tucked. His training with Ali showed in his form. It was clean, economical, professional. He had real skill backing up all that muscle. This wasn't just some gym bully. This was an athlete who understood fighting. "Your move, little man," Marcus said through his guard. "Show me this kung fu magic." Bruce still didn't move. He barely seemed to breathe. He was reading Marcus the way scholars read ancient texts, finding meaning beneath the surface, finding patterns in what appeared random. "Come on," Marcus urged, starting to circle now, light on his feet despite the mass. "You called me out. Don't freeze up now." Bruce turned slightly, tracking Marcus's movement, but not mirroring it. His hands remained at his sides. He looked completely unprepared, completely vulnerable. Several people in the crowd exchanged glances. Was this guy serious? Was he going to just stand there? Marcus feinted with his left. Testing. Bruce didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't blink. Marcus threw a jab, pulling it at the last second so it stopped inches from Bruce's face. Fast, clean, the kind of punch that would have legitimate power behind it if he'd followed through. Bruce's head moved maybe an inch, just enough that the punch passed through empty air instead of connecting. The movement was so minimal it looked like Marcus had missed rather than Bruce had evaded. "Okay," Marcus said, nodding slightly. "You got some reflexes. Good. Now, let's see what happens when I actually try." He threw a combination. Jab, cross, hook. Real punches now. Still controlled, but with intention behind them. He was testing Bruce's defense, trying to see what this little martial artist actually had. Bruce moved. Not dramatically. Not with the exaggerated motions of movie fighting. He simply wasn't where the punches were going. Each strike passed through the space his head or body had occupied a fraction of a second earlier. And each time, he'd shifted just enough to make Marcus miss without appearing to have moved at all. It was economical to the point of being unsettling. No wasted motion. No unnecessary defense. Just the minimum movement required to make violence pass harmlessly by. The crowd went quieter. This wasn't what they'd expected. They'd expected Bruce to try to block, to back up, to cover and survive. They hadn't expected this ghost-like evasion that made Marcus's clean, powerful punches look clumsy. Marcus's expression changed. The amusement was gone now, replaced by focus. He was a professional athlete, and professionals adjusted. He pressed forward, throwing faster combinations, using his reach advantage, trying to cut off the angles Bruce was using to evade. But something strange was happening. The more Marcus threw, the more he seemed to be fighting himself. His punches were landing in empty air. His combinations leading him off balance. His footwork getting tangled as he chased a target that refused to be where he expected. And Bruce still hadn't thrown a single strike. "Stand still," Marcus growled, frustration creeping into his voice. "Why?" Bruce asked, and his breathing was completely normal, like he was having a conversation instead of avoiding punches from a trained fighter. Marcus switched tactics. He'd been trying to box, trying to use the skills Ali had taught him. Now he decided to use what nature had given him. Overwhelming physical power. He rushed forward, trying to grab Bruce, trying to use his size and strength to trap this elusive, smaller man and end this embarrassing display. He was fast for a man his size, genuinely fast. His hands reached out to grab, to clinch, to bring his weight and power into play in a way that speed couldn't counter. Bruce moved again, but this time, differently. He didn't evade backward or sideways. He moved forward, inside Marcus's reach, closer to the bigger man's body than seemed possible. And as he moved, his hand came up. It wasn't a punch. It didn't look like a punch. It looked like Bruce was pushing, like he was simply placing his palm against Marcus's massive chest with no more force than you'd use to test if a wall was solid. The sound was sharp and wet, like a drumstick hitting a side of beef. Marcus's entire body stopped as if he'd run into an invisible wall. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a perfect O of shock. And then, impossibly, this 250 pounds mass of muscle stumbled backward, 3 full steps, his arms windmilling for balance, his face contorted in an expression that mixed pain with complete disbelief. He caught himself against a weight rack, one hand going to his chest where Bruce had touched him. His breathing was labored, like he'd just finished sprinting. He stared at Bruce with an expression that couldn't quite process what had just happened. The gym was absolutely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. They'd all seen it. But seeing and understanding were two different things. Bruce stood in the same spot, hand returning to his side, his breathing still calm and even. He looked at Marcus without triumph, without mockery, just patient observation. "You said mass creates power," Bruce said quietly, his voice carrying through the shocked silence. "But power doesn't come from mass. It comes from the transfer of energy, from understanding how force moves through the body, from precision, timing, and intention." Marcus was still trying to catch his breath. His hand remained pressed against his chest, and you could see him testing it, probing, trying to understand what had just happened to his body. There was no mark, no visible damage, but something had happened. Everyone had seen it. That was... Marcus started, then stopped. He didn't have words for it. 3 inches of penetrating force, Bruce said, directed through your sternum, compressing your solar plexus, disrupting your breathing and your nervous system's ability to maintain structure. "I didn't hit you hard. I hit you precisely." One of Marcus's friends stepped forward, concern on his face. "Marcus, you good, man?" Marcus nodded slowly, but he didn't take his eyes off Bruce. The way he looked at him had completely changed. The condescension was gone. The amusement was gone. In its place was something like respect, mixed with a healthy dose of wariness. "You could have hit me harder," Marcus said. "It wasn't a question." "Much harder," Bruce confirmed. "But you weren't trying to hurt me. I saw no reason to hurt you." Marcus pushed off from the weight rack, standing upright but moving carefully like his body was still figuring out what had been done to it. "How? How is that even possible? You're half my size." "Because you're thinking about strength wrong," Bruce said, and his voice had shifted now into something that sounded almost like teaching. "You've built your body like a fortress, walls of muscle, maximum mass, and fortresses are powerful things. But they're also rigid. They can't adapt. They can only resist." He took a step closer to Marcus, and this time, Marcus didn't use his size to intimidate. He just listened. "Water is soft," Bruce continued. "Weak by your definition. But water shapes stone not through force, through persistence. Through finding the weakness in the structure and flowing into it." Marcus was still rubbing his chest, and you could see his mind working, trying to reconcile what his body had just experienced with everything he thought he knew about fighting. Around them, the circle of spectators remained frozen, watching this conversation like it was scripture being written in real time. "Water shapes stone," Marcus repeated slowly, testing the words. "That's philosophy, man. That's not fighting." "Everything is philosophy until you understand it," Bruce said. "Then it becomes technique. Then it becomes reflex. Then it becomes truth." One of the other bodybuilders, a thick-necked guy with arms like tree trunks, spoke up from the crowd. "Okay, but that's one shot. One good shot don't mean you'd win a real fight. Marcus pulls his punches because he's a good guy. But in the street, in the ring, size still matters. Power still matters." Bruce turned to look at him, and the movement was so fluid it didn't seem like turning at all. More like his attention had simply relocated. You're right. Size matters. Power matters. But not in the way you think. He walked over to the nearest bench press station, where a barbell was loaded with what looked like 300 pounds. He gestured to it. This is power. Yes, this is strength. The ability to move heavy weight. The thick-necked guy nodded. Damn right it is. But power. For what purpose? Bruce asked. To lift? To press? These are useful things. But in a fight? When does fighting ever look like lifting weights? He picked up a pen that someone had left on a nearby bench. Held it up. This weighs almost nothing. By your definition. It has no power. No strength. But if I know where to apply it, I can end a fight with it. The eye. The throat. Precision points where the body is vulnerable regardless of how much muscle surrounds them. Marcus had recovered enough to join the conversation again, though he was still moving carefully. All right, I get what you're saying. Technique matters. Precision matters. I'm not stupid enough to argue with what I just felt. But you're still talking about perfect scenarios. What happens when someone actually connects with you? When you can't slip every punch? Mass absorbs damage. Muscle protects. That's biology, not philosophy. You're absolutely correct, Bruce said, and several people looked surprised that he'd agreed. Muscle does protect. Mass does absorb damage. If two fighters have equal skill, the larger fighter has an advantage. But that's the question, isn't it? Equal skill. He moved back toward the center of the open space, and the crowd shifted with him, reforming the circle. Most fighters train their bodies, but neglect the weapon that determines every fight before it begins. He tapped his temple. The mind, the ability to read an opponent, to see not just what they're doing, but what they're about to do, to understand the pattern before the pattern completes. Danny Chin had been quiet this whole time, but now, he spoke up. Bruce, show them the 1-inch punch. They need to see the 1-inch punch. Several people in the crowd perked up. 1-inch punch? What's that? Bruce hesitated. And you could see he didn't love the theatrical aspect of demonstrations. But he also understood that sometimes showing was more effective than telling. It's not magic, he said. It's an illustration of how force generation works. How the entire body can contribute to a single point of impact even when there's minimal distance to accelerate. Marcus's interest was clearly piqued despite himself. You're telling me you can generate knockback power from 1 inch away? Not knockback power, Bruce corrected. Penetrating power. There's a difference. Knockback is what happens when you hit someone and they fly backward in movies. That's wasted energy. Force going through the target and dissipating into space. Penetrating power goes into the target and stays there, disrupting structure from the inside. The thick-necked bodybuilder stepped forward. All right, I'll bite. Show us. Hit me with this 1-inch punch. Bruce looked at him carefully. You're sure? It's uncomfortable, man. I can bench 425. I've taken shots from heavy hitters. I think I can handle whatever you're selling. Bruce nodded. What's your name? Trevor. Trevor. Stand here. Bruce positioned him, making sure his feet were planted. His weight settled. Don't lean back. Don't brace yourself in any unusual way. Just stand naturally. Like you would if someone was going to push you. Trevor nodded, settling into position. He was massive, easily 240 pounds. All of it muscle and bone and the kind of density that came from years of progressive overload. He looked completely stable, like you could ram him with a car and he'd dent the bumper. Bruce stood facing him, measured the distance carefully, then placed his fist against Trevor's chest just over the solar plexus. 1 inch of space between his fist and the point of contact. His other hand rested on Trevor's shoulder, not for support, just for positioning. "Ready?" Bruce asked. "Do your worst," Trevor said, grinning confidently. Bruce's entire body shifted. It wasn't a wind-up, wasn't a telegraph. It was like watching a wave travel through water, starting from his back foot, rising through his legs, torso, shoulder, and finally expressing itself through his fist in a sharp, compact explosion. The sound was like a crack of thunder in a small room. Trevor's eyes bulged, his mouth opened, and his entire 240 pounds body lifted slightly off the ground and traveled backward a good 6 feet before his legs remembered how to work. And he caught himself, stumbling, gasping for air like he'd been underwater. The gym exploded with noise. Shouts of disbelief, someone swearing loudly, others laughing, not from amusement, but from the sheer absurdity of what they'd just witnessed. Trevor stood there, bent slightly forward, both hands on his chest now, breathing hard. When he finally looked up at Bruce, his expression had gone through confusion and landed somewhere in the neighborhood of religious conversion. "What the hell was that?" he managed to gasp out. "That," Bruce said calmly, "is your entire body receiving focused force that it wasn't structurally prepared to absorb or redirect. Your muscle didn't protect you because the force didn't give your muscle time to respond. It went through the gaps in your structure, found the nervous system underneath, and disrupted it." Marcus was staring now with undisguised fascination. The professional athlete in him was completely engaged. "Do it again. Do it to me again. I want to feel it knowing what to expect." Bruce shook his head. "Knowing what to expect doesn't change the physics. And I'd rather not cause unnecessary discomfort." "Man, forget discomfort. I need to understand this." Marcus moved to where Trevor had been standing, positioned himself, planted his feet. "Come on, I can take it." Bruce studied him for a moment, then nodded. He positioned himself, placed his fist against Marcus's massive chest, measured the distance. This time, Marcus was watching everything, watching Bruce's feet, his hips, his shoulder, trying to see where the power was coming from, trying to understand the mechanics of what was about to happen to him. Bruce's body shifted again, that same wave-like motion, and his fist drove forward with a sharp snap. Marcus's reaction was even more dramatic than Trevor's. This 250 pounds man who sparred with Muhammad Ali, who had absorbed punishment from one of the hardest hitters in boxing history, stumbled backward 7 feet, hit a support pillar, and slid partially down it, his face a mask of shock and pain. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, and his voice was barely audible. "Jesus Christ, how is that possible?" The crowd had gone from excited noise back to stunned silence. They were watching something that violated their fundamental understanding of how strength worked. These were men who'd spent years building their bodies according to a very specific philosophy. More mass equals more power equals more capability. And in less than 10 minutes, this 138 pounds martial artist had dismantled that entire worldview. Danny Chun was smiling now. That smile of someone who tried to tell people something and finally had proof they were right. You see what I've been talking about? Bruce isn't just a fighter. He's figured out something different. Something most people don't even know exists." Marcus pushed himself away from the pillar. Still moving carefully, still processing, he walked over to Bruce. And this time, there was no swagger, no condescension, no amusement, just genuine respect and curiosity. "Teach me," he said simply. Bruce raised an eyebrow. "Teach you? Whatever that is. Whatever you're doing, I want to learn it." Marcus glanced around at his training partners, at the crowd. "We all want to learn it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the spectators. These massive men who'd walked in here thinking they understood strength were suddenly hungry students faced with a master they hadn't known existed. Bruce was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he shook his head slowly. What I'm doing isn't a technique you can learn in an afternoon. It's not a trick. It's a complete rethinking of how the body generates and applies force. It requires unlearning most of what you think you know. Then help us unlearn it, Marcus said. Man, I've been training my whole life. I've worked with the best boxers alive. I thought I understood fighting. But what you just did, I've never seen anything like it. I've never felt anything like it. Trevor had recovered enough to join them now. He's right. That wasn't just hitting hard. I've been hit hard. I box on weekends. I know what power feels like. This was different. It was like you hit me from the inside out. Because I did, Bruce said. Your external muscle is armor. Yes, but armor has gaps. Seems weak points where the structure transitions. The solar plexus is one of these points. It's where your respiratory diaphragm connects, where major nerve clusters live, where the structure of your rib cage is most vulnerable to compression. I didn't hit your armor. I hit through it, targeting what it's meant to protect.